our keynote speaker, Mr. Errol Gibbs. I'm just going to give a quick introduction in case you haven't had a chance to take a look at it. Errol is a writer, self-inspired researcher, and an international motivational speaker. He was born in the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago, West Indies. Errol immigrated to Canada in 1969. He has lived in both Canada and the United States for 39 years and 6 years, respectively. Errol is a former employee of Ontario Power Generation, where he worked in various capacities in both the thermal and nuclear power generation divisions. He held positions such as planning and scheduling engineer officer and project management analyst. In 1997, Errol moved to the United States under the auspice of the North American Free Trade Agreement. He joined a project management and business consulting firm as the resident scientific technologist and senior process designer. Errol practiced in the field of business process reengineering in the automobile engineering and manufacturing sector for such corporations as General Motors, Daimler Chrysler, and Allison Transmission. In the year 2000, Errol wrote a white paper entitled Manufacturing Engineering Project Office, a link to supplier integration, which he co-presented at a global conference on project management. Errol has traveled to major cities in the United States and to parts of England, France, and Italy. He has also traveled to Ghana, the American and British Virgin Islands, and parts of the Caribbean. He currently resides in Milton, Ontario. So, if we could please give a warm welcome to Mr. Gibbs.
Good evening, everyone. First, let me thank the Xchange group, the executives, for this opportunity to speak to you tonight, share briefly on some of my own concerns and some of the concerns of the larger community regarding Black empowerment. The intent of this conference, or this presentation, is to inspire further talks and dialogues regarding what I call a mission critical direction, or a new mission critical direction. And it's good to say new because the old one isn't working very well for us. Although I use the word Black in my presentation in an all-encompassing manner, I think we all recognize that Black community is a complex microcosm of the greater society, perhaps even more complex. The word community is a misnomer. We use it very often in our discussions because community implies a social and cohesive unit, working together, sharing a common vision and mission, values, intent, belief, resources, and purpose. These ought to be the salient attributes that resonates within the Black community and in the Canadian diaspora, and also abroad. Likewise, the phrase community empowerment has found a permanent place in the lexicon of the Black community vocabulary. But what is community empowerment? Are you empowered? Blacks who live on the continent of North America are fortunate to be at the epicenter of two of the major financial capitals of the world. Can we live in a capitalist society without capital? Anyone wants to answer that question? For the approximately 5 decades, the Black community has been on the radar for all levels of funding and grants from federal and provincial governments and other funding agencies such as the Trillium Foundation. Black community organizations have become a major growth industry. Funding has its place in the economic empowerment equation, but funding has become the proxy or the substitute for Black empowerment. It is a double-edged sword because of the perpetual dependency and the inadvertent economic powerlessness that it creates, fostered by charity law and funding policies and guidelines. Illogically, funding and loans slowly extinguishes the lights of self-determination. It suffocates innovation, creativity, and assertiveness among non-profit organizations, institutions, and even nations, thus rendering these entities powerless as economic engines to foster growth. Over the past 5 decades, tens of millions of federal and provincial dollars have been spent on studies and reports and community initiatives in a noble response to inequities and calamities in the Black community. Yet it would be an enormous challenge to try to quantify macro-level job creation infrastructure or measure significant Black economic progress. When we pan the horizon of the resource-rich continent of Africa, the Caribbean, or wherever Blacks live to a great extent, others control our earthly destiny. Whether it's the World Bank or the IMF, power rests in the hand of the benefactor. Nonetheless, some Blacks have achieved remarkably individual progress. From bank managers, economists, accountants, lawyers, doctors, nurses, engineers, or professors, but we lack collective progress. Observe Asia's 5-dragon economic growth. At the end of World War II, Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore were war-shattered, largely resource-poor areas with rapidly growing populations, very low living standards. By the 1980s, Japan had become one of the world's richest countries, and the others had achieved or were approaching levels of income close to the developed nations. Fueled by scientific and technological progress. Where do we go from here? So those are the problems. Many times we don't like to hear what the problems are, but we can't derive a solution without understanding the problems, even philosophically what the problems are. So I propose 7 perspectives that Blacks need to take away for contemplation of creating a new Black economy. They are intrinsically linked and are mutually inclusive. Although I've taken the Black focus, to a great extent, some of the arguments can be applied equally to other minority groups. So there are 7 perspectives. When we try to solve problems, we tend to take one-dimensional approaches. But in order to solve our problems and take us to a new frontier, we need a governmental perspective. You can make some notes here. A private sector perspective. We need a community perspective, a consular perspective, a family perspective, and a philanthropic perspective. So that gives us a holistic solution. So I'll speak briefly to each one of these perspectives. Governments have both responsibility and accountability for empowering communities. But funding, grants, loans ought to be secondary. The primary mechanisms are: 1, to inspire equitable employment in both private, public, and the community sectors. 2, to dispense government services, hiring and promoting equitably. 3, to create empowerment zones in Black communities. 4, this one is very critical, is to distribute the billions of dollars in procurement contracts fairly and equitably. 5 is to apply immigration and settlement support equitably. These mechanisms demand direct government and private sector intervention, such as aiding in capacity building within the Black community. From a private sector perspective, the economy is driven by science-based education, knowledge, competency, diligence, punctuality, productivity, and shareholder profit. Blacks need to understand the rapidly changing dynamics of business and industry. The robots are coming. Most of you are aware of that. Oh, they're here, someone said. Jobs are going overseas. and competition for jobs have gone global. Careers must be seen through a different set of lenses than in the past. The private sector must be encouraged to invest and support a diverse workplace, but this can only be accomplished through government administrative mechanisms, public advocacy, and the availability of science-based graduates. But first, the Black community needs to formulate a clear and shared vision. Without a clear vision and mission, neither governments nor private sector would be able to determine needs, priorities, and emergencies of the Black community. Furthermore, how will they be able to address them? From a big picture standpoint, failure to embrace long-term strategy for Black economic progress and failure to integrate from a transnational perspective will relegate future generations to perpetual dependency. More importantly, failure to aggregate financial and intellectual resources to maintain national ownership will give rise to greater foreign capital, foreign ownership, and dependency on other nations for our survival. Black community empowerment means repositioning ourselves to do 7 things. Increase science and technology-based education throughout the diaspora. Foster innovation and creativity in our community. As we speak, there's a group from Pakistan this weekend, and they're having a conference, and they're looking at coming together with ideas where they can convert into products and market through the Pakistani entrepreneurs. So they're actually coming together here, and they're taking these great ideas back because we are resource-based, intellectually resource-based here, where we are today. Capital of finance, one of. We must look inwardly to our primary source for motivation, and only look towards government and funding agencies as enablers. Assess our weaknesses and evaluate our marketable strengths and build capacity. Study the way international communities work. Evaluate model nations or bloc nations. As an example, Asia's 5 dragon nations. Develop business and project management expertise and better understand business capitalization. Increase ownership capacity, but not merely ownership of small commercial businesses, such as law offices, eating establishments, real estate offices, or printing establishment, just to name a few. But ownership of major patents, trademarks, copyrights, computer printed circuit designs, industrial designs. These are the true global economic engines of a modern economy. They foster research and development, mass production techniques, mass manufacturing, and job creation. The 3 most potent personal perspectives are: strive to rise to a higher level of spiritual, moral, social, intellectual responsibility, trustworthiness, and business integrity in dealing with each other and others. Strive to reduce black on black violence and economic crimes against ourselves, of course. Strive to avoid the breakdown of the black family. So with all of the technical ramifications and all of the highfalutin education that we have, nothing will bring us closer to self-sufficiency and economic independence than simply taking care of each other. It doesn't cost us a penny. It costs us more to capitalize a project. The various consulates that represent blacks in the Canadian diaspora should strive to create a database where expatriates and expertise in various fields of endeavor can post their resumes and respond to opportunities throughout the diaspora. To strive for greater exchange of knowledge and opportunities for collaboration among countries through exchange programs, scholarships to fulfill strategic needs, and the utilization of post-retirees' knowledge. Strive to facilitate the fast-track exchange student visas and professional work permits, work visas, similar to NAFTA. I got a visa in 15 minutes to work in the United States, went for 6 months and spent 6 years. How interesting is that? Okay? Why can't we do it in the abroad, Caribbean, African nations? We do the same thing. 15 minutes, had a visa. Went for 6 years, 6 months, and had a glorious 6 years traveling across the United States of America and going as high as I wanted to go after speaking at a global conference on project management. We should have the same opportunities across the black world. Just like the Free Trade Agreement for visiting professors, teachers, doctors, engineers, project management professionals, technologists, and technicians. We are all here, we are all available. Strive to facilitate black enterprises by enabling them with the capacity to undertake projects in joint ventures with local entrepreneurs and enterprises. And 5, again, somehow the more softer issues are the more critical issues. Try to foster a climate that is welcoming to expatriates. I have friends who have gone back to Trinidad. One of my friends I spoke to recently is a mechanical engineer in the US, in England actually. He spent 6 months and he's back in England, scratching his head. Shouldn't be. From a family perspective, families must comprehend that their children exist in a competitive world where they're competing on a global scale. Unlike yesteryear, parents must be prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice, financial, time and money, well, financial time, to ensure that their children obtain a quality education and that they are articulate, they are critical thinkers, and they must write well. From a philanthropic standpoint, there's a desperate need for professional businessmen, philanthropists in the black community to provide business loans, funding, and grants to assist with scholarships, startup capital, and research and development resources. More importantly, some of these opportunities must be free of national barriers among the blacks in the Caribbean diaspora. Thank you very much for listening.